The day Janet's aunt called me for a blind date setup, I watched through the coffee shop window as Janet herself walked in to stop it. She grabbed her aunt's phone, scrolled through my profile picture, and laughed that cold, dismissive laugh I knew too well. "Auntie, don't waste your time on him," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar arrogance. "He's not worth anyone's effort. Trust me, I know him better than anyone." Her aunt looked confused, but Janet just shook her head, smiling like she'd just saved someone from a terrible mistake. "He'll never amount to anything. Some people are just born to stay at the bottom." I sat 3 tables away, hidden behind a newspaper, watching the girl who'd once meant everything to me tear apart my character without knowing I was right there. She had no idea I'd become the person her aunt wanted to introduce her to. She had no idea that in the 3 years since she'd walked out of my life, I'd transformed completely. And she definitely had no idea that by tomorrow morning, I'd be signing marriage papers with someone else. Someone who actually saw my worth. Someone who didn't measure love by the size of a bank account. I texted her aunt back, "Thank you for thinking of me, but I'm getting married next week. I hope you understand." I watched Janet's face as her aunt read the message aloud, watched that confident smirk falter for just a second before she shrugged it off. "Good for him," she said, though her voice sounded strained. "Whoever she is, she's settling for very little." She gathered her designer purse, the one some rich boyfriend probably bought her, and walked out without looking back, just like she always did. Just like she did 3 years ago, when she told me I'd never be able to give her the life she deserved. But this time, I wasn't the one left behind, nursing a broken heart and shattered dreams. This time, I was the one moving forward. And she was about to find out exactly what she'd thrown away. Janet Miller and I grew up on the same street in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business. Our parents were friends, the kind who had weekend barbecues and holiday dinners together. Naturally, we became friends too, though calling it friendship was always complicated. Even as kids, there was a hierarchy between us. Her father owned 3 car dealerships across the state. My father worked as a mechanic in one of them. Her mother was a socialite who organized charity galas. My mother cleaned houses to make ends meet, including theirs, sometimes. Janet was beautiful, the kind of beautiful that made people stop and stare. Tall, with long dark hair that caught the light like silk, sharp green eyes that could cut through you with a glance, and a smile that could make you forget your own name. By high school, she was untouchable. The girl everyone wanted but nobody could have. And me? I was Jimmy Norton, the mechanic's son, decent enough looking but unremarkable, smart but not brilliant, athletic but not a star. I was the kid who worked 2 part-time jobs to help pay bills, who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, who brought packed lunches while others bought from the cafeteria. We were worlds apart, but somehow, we stayed connected. Maybe because our parents were friends, or maybe because deep down, beneath all her pride and my insecurity, there was something real between us. Or at least, I thought there was. It started the summer before our senior year. Janet's car broke down on a back road, and I happened to be driving by. I pulled over, fixed whatever was wrong with her engine, some loose connection I repaired with electrical tape and determination, and refused to let her pay me. "You don't owe me anything," I told her, wiping grease off my hands. She looked at me differently that day, like she was seeing me for the first time. "Jimmy," she said softly, "you're actually pretty capable, aren't you?" That was the kindest thing she'd ever said to me, and I held onto it like a lifeline. After that, things changed. She started texting me late at night, random thoughts and questions that didn't really need answers. She'd ask me to help her with math homework, even though she was perfectly capable of doing it herself. She'd show up at the garage where I worked part-time, claiming she needed an oil change, then stay for hours just talking. I fell for her completely. Hopelessly. Pathetically. Everyone at school noticed. They'd whisper about it in hallways, how the poor kid had a crush on the princess. Some pitied me. Others mocked me. Janet never acknowledged it publicly. When we were alone, she was warm, almost affectionate. But in school, in front of her friends, I barely existed. I told myself it didn't matter, that she was just protecting her reputation, that eventually things would change. I was an idiot. The real shift happened during our first year of college. We ended up at universities in the same city, different schools but close enough to see each other. That's when our relationship became physical. It started after a party, both of us drunk, stumbling back to my tiny apartment. She kissed me first, grabbed my shirt and pulled me close with a desperation I'd never seen in her before. "Don't think this means anything," she whispered against my lips. But I did think it meant something. I thought it meant everything. For 2 years, we had this secret arrangement. She'd come over late at night, we'd be together, and then she'd leave before sunrise. Sometimes she'd stay long enough to share breakfast, sitting across from me in one of my old shirts, looking so beautiful it hurt. Those were the moments I lived for, the moments when I could pretend we were actually together, actually in love. But we weren't. She made that clear in 1,000 small ways. She never let me meet her college friends. She never posted about me on social media. When we ran into people she knew while we were out, she'd introduce me as a family friend, or sometimes not introduce me at all. And worst of all, she kept dating other guys, rich guys. Guys who could take her to expensive restaurants and buy her jewelry and whisk her away on weekend trips. Guys who looked good in pictures, who fit into her world in ways I never could. It's not serious with them, she'd tell me when I worked up the courage to ask. You know you're different. But different didn't mean better. Different meant secret, hidden, not good enough to claim publicly. I should have walked away 1,000 times, but I was addicted to her. Addicted to the way she looked at me in those rare vulnerable moments. Addicted to the feeling of her skin against mine. Addicted to the fantasy that someday she'd choose me. My friends tried to warn me. Michael, my roommate, and best friend since childhood, was the most direct. Jimmy, she's using you, he said one night after Janet had left without saying goodbye again. You're her backup plan, her comfort zone. But she's never going to be with you for real. You don't know her, like I do. I argued weakly. You're right, he said, I don't, but I know you, and I know you deserve better than someone who treats you like a secret. I didn't listen. I kept hoping, kept waiting for the moment when Janet would realize I was enough. That moment never came. Instead, the end came on a cold February night during our junior year. She showed up at my apartment earlier than usual, and I knew immediately something was different. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her phone, avoiding eye contact. Jimmy, she started, her voice unusually gentle, we need to talk. Those 4 words every person in a relationship dreads, even those of us who weren't technically in a relationship at all. What's wrong? I asked, though part of me already knew. She sat down on my couch, the same couch where we'd spent countless nights together, and took a deep breath. I've been seeing someone, she said. Seriously seeing someone. His name is Bradley. He's in law school, and it's getting serious, real serious. I felt something crack inside my chest. So what does that mean for us? There is no us. She said softly, finally meeting my eyes. There never really was, Jimmy. You know that. Then what have we been doing for 2 years? Having fun, she said with a sad smile. Enjoying each other's company. But it was never going anywhere. You had to know that. Why not? The question came out more desperate than I intended. Why couldn't it go somewhere? What's he got that I don't? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something like pity in her eyes. That's when I knew whatever came next was going to destroy me. Jimmy, you're a good person. You're kind, you're reliable, you work hard. But that's not enough. I need someone who can give me the life I want. Someone who can take me to Europe in the summer and buy me a house in a nice neighborhood and never make me worry about money. Someone who fits into my world. And I can't be that person. Not right now, she said. Maybe not ever. And I can't wait around to find out. I wanted to argue, to promise her I'd work harder. Make more money. Become whoever she needed me to be. But looking at her face, at the way she'd already made up her mind, I knew it was pointless. So that's it? I asked. That's it, she confirmed, standing up and smoothing her skirt. It's better this way, ending it now before things get more complicated, before you get hurt, worse. Too late for that, I thought. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the knob, and looked back at me one last time. For what it's worth, Jimmy, I did care about you. In my own way. Then she left, and I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by the ghost of her presence, wondering how I'd been stupid enough to think someone like her could ever really love someone like me. The weeks after Janet left were the darkest of my life. I stopped going to classes, stopped answering calls from friends, stopped doing anything except lying in bed and replaying every moment we'd shared, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Michael tried to pull me out of it, dragging me to meals, forcing me to shower, but nothing helped. The worst part was seeing her around campus. She didn't hide her new relationship the way she'd hidden me. I'd see them together constantly, Bradley with his perfectly styled hair and expensive suits. Janet laughing at his jokes. Holding his hand, kissing him in public without shame or hesitation. Everything she'd never done with me. Once. We made eye contact across the student center. She looked at me for a brief second, something unreadable in her expression, then turned back to Bradley like I didn't exist. That moment hurt worse than the breakup itself. It confirmed what I'd always feared, that I'd never mattered enough to leave even a small mark on her life. But pain has a funny way of transforming people. After a month of wallowing, something shifted inside me. I was lying in bed one afternoon, staring at the ceiling, when Michael barged in and threw open the curtains. "Enough," he said firmly. "You've mourned long enough. Now you have two choices. You can keep letting her destroy you, or you can prove her wrong about everything she said." "How am I supposed to do that?" I asked bitterly. "I'm exactly what she said I am. Poor, ordinary, not good enough. Right now, maybe," Michael admitted. "But that doesn't have to be your forever. You're smart, Jimmy. Smarter than half the guys she dates. You work harder than anyone I know. The only difference between you and them is opportunity and confidence. Opportunity I don't have," I pointed out. "Then create it," he said. "Stop waiting for life to hand you something. Go take it." His words planted a seed that grew into obsession. I threw myself into school with intensity I'd never had before. I changed my major to business and computer science, started taking extra courses, spent every free moment learning skills that could actually make me money. I read books about entrepreneurship, watched videos about investing, taught myself coding and web design. I stopped working the dead-end part-time jobs and started freelancing, building websites and apps for small businesses. The money was terrible at first, barely enough to cover rent, but I was building something. A portfolio, a reputation, a future. I stopped going to parties. Stopped dating. Stopped doing anything that didn't move me forward. My friends thought I was crazy, working 18-hour days, surviving on coffee and determination. But I couldn't stop. Every time I felt tired or discouraged, I'd remember Janet's words. "You could never give me the life I want." I'd remember the pity in her eyes, the casual cruelty of her dismissal. And I'd work harder. During summer break of our senior year, I landed my first real client, a medium-sized company that needed a complete website overhaul. They paid me $15,000, more money than I'd ever seen in my life. Instead of celebrating, I reinvested it, bought better equipment, took online courses to improve my skills, marketed myself more aggressively. By the time we graduated, I had a steady stream of clients and had hired 2 other students to help with overflow work. It wasn't much, not compared to the wealth Janet was used to, but it was mine. I'd built it from nothing. I moved to the city after graduation, rented a tiny studio apartment, and kept grinding. I barely slept those first 2 years, taking every project I could get, slowly building my reputation. My little freelance operation grew into an actual company. I hired more people, rented office space, started landing bigger clients. The money improved, then improved more, then suddenly I was making more in a month than my father had made in a year. 3 years after Janet left me, I'd transformed completely. I had a successful business, a nice apartment, a car that didn't break down every other week. I'd learned how to dress better, carry myself with confidence, navigate social situations without feeling inferior. On paper, I'd become exactly the kind of man Janet had wanted. But the strangest thing had happened during those 3 years. I'd stopped wanting her. Somewhere in the midst of building my life, the obsession had faded. I'd realized that Janet had never actually loved me, and I'd never actually loved her either. I'd loved the idea of her, loved the validation of being wanted by someone so far above my station. But I hadn't loved who she really was, the coldness beneath her beauty, the casual cruelty with which she treated people she deemed beneath her. I'd built my new life to prove her wrong. But in doing so, I'd outgrown the need for her approval. That's when Clara appeared. Or rather, reappeared in my life. Clara had gone to our high school. A quiet girl who'd always been kind to me even when others weren't. We'd been lab partners in chemistry. Had shared comfortable silences and easy conversations. After high school, she'd gone to art school in another state, and we'd lost touch. She reached out through social media, said she was moving to the city for work as a graphic designer, asked if I knew the area well enough to give recommendations. We met for coffee, just as friends catching up. She'd changed, grown into her features, developed a confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was. But more than her appearance, I was struck by how easy it felt to be around her. There was no pretense, no games, no feeling like I had to prove myself. We just talked, laughed, enjoyed each other's company. "I heard you started your own company," she said, stirring her latte. "That's incredible, Jimmy. You were always so capable." "Not according to some people," I said without thinking. She tilted her head. "Janet Miller?" I blinked in surprise. "How did you know?" "Everyone at school knew you were hung up on her," Clara said gently. "And everyone except you could see she was never going to appreciate what she had." "Had is the right word," I said. "That ended a long time ago." "Good," Clara said simply. You deserve someone who sees your worth without you having to prove it first. That coffee turned into dinner the next week, which turned into a weekend art gallery visit, which turned into regular dates. Clara was different from Janet in every way that mattered. She was warm where Janet had been cold, open where Janet had been secretive, encouraging where Janet had been dismissive. She celebrated my successes without making me feel like I had to earn her affection. She introduced me to her friends immediately, posted pictures of us together without hesitation, made it clear to everyone that she was proud to be with me. For the first time in my life, I understood what it felt like to be chosen, not as a secret or a backup plan, but as someone's first choice. 6 months into dating Clara, I knew I wanted to marry her. Not because I was trying to prove anything to anyone, but because being with her felt like coming home after years of being lost. I bought a ring, planned a proposal, and felt genuinely happy in a way I'd never experienced during all those years of chasing Janet. That's when Janet's aunt called about the blind date. I'd forgotten that our parents were still friends, that information about my success had probably filtered back to our hometown. Janet's aunt had always liked me, had probably thought we'd be a good match without knowing the painful history between us. I'd planned to politely decline, but then I saw that Janet herself had come to intercept the setup. I'd watched her dismiss me with the same arrogance she'd always had, watched her assume I was still the same broken boy she'd left behind. And I'd felt nothing except a mild satisfaction that she had no idea how wrong she was. But texting her aunt about my upcoming marriage, watching Janet's confident smirk falter for just that brief moment, that had felt good in a petty way I wasn't entirely proud of. Still, I pushed it out of my mind. Janet was my past, a painful chapter I'd finally closed. Clara was my future, and I wasn't going to let old ghosts interfere with the real happiness I'd found. What I didn't know was that my message had shattered Janet's carefully constructed world. She'd spent the 3 years since our breakup, dating a string of wealthy men, each one more successful than the last, but none of them lasting. Bradley, the law student, had cheated on her. Marcus, the investment banker, had been emotionally abusive. David, the tech entrepreneur, had dumped her for a younger woman. She'd cycled through relationships like they were accessories, always looking for the next upgrade, never quite satisfied. And through it all, somewhere in the back of her mind, she'd held on to the assumption that I'd always be there, still pining for her. Still available if she ever decided to settle for something comfortable and safe. She told herself she didn't think about me often, but that was a lie. She thought about me constantly, especially late at night when she was alone. She'd remember the way I used to look at her, like she was the only person in the world, the way I'd drop everything to help her with even the smallest problem. The way I'd made her feel safe in a way none of these wealthy men ever did, but she'd always dismissed those thoughts. Safety wasn't enough. Security wasn't enough. She wanted excitement, luxury, status. She wanted a life that looked perfect from the outside, even if it felt hollow on the inside. When her mother mentioned that the Norton boy had done well for himself, started some kind of tech company, Janet had rolled her eyes. Good for him, she'd thought. Maybe he'd finally be able to afford a decent apartment. She'd had no idea how well I'd actually done until her aunt started gushing about the potential match. A successful entrepreneur, her aunt had said. Smart, hardworking, exactly the kind of stable man Janet needed. Janet had come to stop the setup partly out of habit. She always interfered when her family tried to set her up with people, and partly out of curiosity. She'd wanted to see if I was still pathetic enough to need help finding dates. Seeing my profile picture, the same awkward Jimmy she remembered, she'd felt that familiar superiority. Of course he'd need a setup. Of course he'd never found anyone on his own. Of course, he was still the same. But then came my message about getting married, and something had cracked in her perfect facade. Married? To whom? How had that happened? And why did the news make her chest feel tight? She'd gone home and immediately started investigating. Social media searches turned up my company page, articles about my success, and finally, buried in my personal account that I rarely updated, a handful of photos with Clara. Janet had stared at those photos for hours, analyzing every detail. Clara wasn't as conventionally beautiful as Janet, didn't have the same polish or sophistication. But in every photo, she was smiling genuinely, looking at me with obvious affection. And I was smiling back in a way I'd never smiled with Janet, open, and happy, and free. She clicked through Clara's profile, which unlike mine was regularly updated. There were pictures of us at restaurants, at parks, at what looked like a company party. In every single one, I looked proud to be with her. My arm around her shoulders, her hand in mine, no hiding, no shame. Everything Janet had never given me. The engagement announcement appeared a week later. A simple photo of Clara's hand wearing a modest but elegant ring, caption, reading, he said, forever sounded perfect. The comments were full of congratulations. Friends, celebrating. People who clearly knew us as a couple and were genuinely happy for us. Janet felt something dark and ugly twist in her stomach. Jealousy, she finally admitted to herself. She was jealous of this random girl who'd somehow ended up with the one person who'd ever loved Janet unconditionally. She told herself it was ridiculous. She dated men far wealthier than I could ever be, far more handsome, far more prestigious. Why should she care that I was marrying some nobody? But she did care. She cared intensely, obsessively. She started checking my social media daily, looking for any scrap of information. She asked mutual acquaintances about me, casual questions that she pretended were just friendly curiosity. She learned that my company was worth several $1 million, that I'd been featured in business magazines, that I was considered a rising star in the local tech scene. Everything she'd said I'd never achieve, I'd achieved. And I'd done it without her. The realization hit her one night while she was lying alone in her expensive apartment, paid for by her parents because her own career as a social media influencer was barely profitable. She'd spent 3 years chasing wealthy men, trying to secure a comfortable future, and had ended up with nothing. No stable relationship, no real career, no purpose beyond maintaining her appearance and social status. Meanwhile, I'd spent 3 years building an actual life, and had found someone who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide. For the first time since she'd left me, Janet questioned whether she'd made the right choice. She started comparing every man she met to me. They were richer, yes, but were they kinder? More genuine? More devoted? The answer was always no. She remembered the way I used to fix her car without being asked, bring her coffee when she was stressed, listen to her problems even when she never asked about mine. She remembered feeling safe with me, feeling like someone actually cared about her well-being and not just her looks or connections. And she'd thrown that away because it hadn't come with enough zeros in a bank account. The engagement party invitation appeared in her aunt's house, and Janet stared at it like it was a death sentence. She wasn't invited. Of course. Why would she be? We hadn't spoken in 3 years, and she'd made it clear I meant nothing to her. But her parents were invited. Old family, friends celebrating the next generation. Are you going? Janet asked her mother, trying to sound casual. Of course, her mother replied. The Nortons have been our friends for decades. It's wonderful that Jimmy found such a lovely girl. Your father and I always liked him. The unspoken criticism hung in the air. They'd liked me, had probably hoped Janet and I would end up together, and were disappointed when she'd thrown me away for a series of unsuitable rich boys. I'm happy for him. Janet lied. But she wasn't happy. She was miserable, consumed by regret, and a desperate need to see me again, to confirm that I'd really moved on, to maybe, possibly, see if there was any chance of getting back what she'd lost. She started showing up places she thought I might be. The coffee shop near my office. The gym I'd mentioned once years ago. Even the old neighborhood where our parents still lived. She told herself she just wanted closure, a chance to see me happy and truly let go. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wanted me back. Not because she'd suddenly fallen in love with me, but because she couldn't stand the idea of me belonging to someone else. She'd never valued me when I was hers. But now that I wasn't, she wanted me with an intensity that terrified her. When she finally saw me one afternoon, walking out of a restaurant with Clara, laughing at something she'd said, looking genuinely content, Janet felt her heart break in a way it never had when she was the one doing the leaving. I looked different, carried myself differently, dressed better, seemed more confident. But more than that, I looked happy. Truly. Deeply happy in a way I'd never looked with her. Clara said something and I pulled her close, kissed the top of her head with casual affection. Such a small gesture, but it spoke of comfort and intimacy and real love. Janet realized with crushing clarity that I'd never been that comfortable with her. Never felt safe enough to show affection so openly. Because she'd never made me feel safe. She'd made me feel anxious, inadequate, like I was always one mistake away from being discarded. Which, of course, I had been. She went home that night and cried for the first time in years, real tears of genuine loss and regret. She'd had something rare and precious, someone who'd loved her completely despite all her flaws, and she'd treated it like garbage. Now it was too late. I was getting married in 2 weeks, and there was nothing she could do about it, except there was something, she realized, something desperate and probably pathetic, but she had to try. She had to see me one more time, talk to me, maybe make me remember what we'd had. Maybe I wasn't as over her as I seemed. Maybe seeing her again would remind me of those late nights, those intimate moments, the connection we'd shared. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot she had, so she started planning. Janet's opportunity came sooner than expected. Michael, my old roommate and still close friend, was throwing a birthday party at a downtown bar. Through mutual connections, Janet managed to get herself invited. She spent hours getting ready that night, choosing a dress that she knew would remind me of old times, a deep red number that hugged every curve, the same color I'd once told her looked stunning on her. She did her makeup carefully, aiming for that perfect balance of natural beauty and calculated enhancement. She told herself this wasn't desperate, this was just closure. Just a conversation between old friends. But her hands shook as she applied lipstick, betraying the truth she wouldn't admit. When she arrived at the bar, she spotted me immediately. I was standing near the back with a group of friends, Clara beside me with her hand resting comfortably on my arm. We looked like a unit, comfortable and connected in a way that made Janet's chest ache. She watched for a while, nursing a drink, studying the way I interacted with Clara. I was attentive but not desperate, affectionate but not performative. I listened when she spoke, laughed at her jokes, included her in conversations naturally. Everything I'd done for Janet, but without the underlying anxiety of trying to prove my worth. Clara excused herself to go to the restroom, and Janet saw her chance. She walked over, timing it perfectly to seem casual. "Jimmy," she said softly, and I turned. For a moment, genuine surprise crossed my face, followed by something harder to read. "Janet." I acknowledged, my tone neutral. "What are you doing here?" "Michael invited me," she said, which was technically true, even if she'd angled for the invitation. "It's been a long time." 3 years, I said precisely. 3 years, 2 months, actually. The fact that I knew the exact timeline sent a small thrill through her. Maybe he'd been counting. Maybe he hadn't forgotten. "I heard you're getting married," she continued, moving closer. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I said simply. She waited for more, for some elaboration or emotion, but I just looked at her calmly. Like she was an acquaintance rather than someone who'd once meant everything. "I also heard you did really well for yourself." She tried again. "Your company, I mean. That's amazing, Jimmy. I always knew you were capable of great things." That was a lie, and we both knew it. I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Did you?" "Of course," she insisted. "You were always so smart, so hardworking. I used to tell people that." Another lie. She'd never talked about me to anyone, had barely acknowledged my existence publicly. "That's a generous revision of history," I said quietly, and she felt her cheeks flush. Before she could respond, Clara returned, sliding naturally into the space beside me. I immediately shifted, my hand finding the small of her back in a gesture so automatic it was clearly habit. "Clara, this is Janet," I introduced. "We grew up together." "Janet, this is Clara, my fiancée." "Nice to meet you," Clara said warmly, extending her hand. She had no idea who Janet really was, no idea of the history. To her, I was just being polite to an old acquaintance. Janet shook her hand, studying her up close. Clara was pretty in an understated way, with warm, brown eyes and an easy smile. She wore minimal makeup and a simple dress, nothing like the designer outfit Janet had agonized over. But she had something Janet didn't, a genuine ease, a comfort in her own skin that didn't require constant validation. "Jimmy's told me about growing up in your town," Clara said conversationally. "It sounds like it was a nice place." "He talks about home?" Janet asked, unable to hide her surprise. During our time together, I'd rarely mentioned my background, too ashamed of the contrast with her wealthy upbringing. "All the time." Clara laughed. "His childhood stories are the best. He's really proud of where he comes from." Something about that simple statement hit Janet hard. I was proud now. Proud of the things I used to hide, the humble background, the hardworking parents, the struggles that had shaped me. Because Clara had made me feel like those things were worth celebrating, not hiding. "I should get back to Michael," Janet said abruptly, unable to bear another minute of watching what she'd lost. "It was nice seeing you, Jimmy. Both of you." She walked away quickly, found a corner of the bar, and ordered something strong. She'd thought seeing me would give her an opening, a chance to remind me of what we'd shared. Instead, she'd seen exactly how completely I'd moved on. An hour later, she was several drinks deep when Michael found her. "You okay?" he asked, sliding into the seat next to her. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied, her words slightly slurred. Michael had never liked Janet, had seen firsthand how she'd treated me, but he wasn't cruel. "Look, I don't know why you really came tonight, but whatever you're thinking, don't." "I don't know what you mean," she said defensively. "Yes, you do," Michael said gently. Jimmy's happy, Janet. Really, genuinely happy for maybe the first time in his life. Don't mess that up because you suddenly realized what you had. I'm not trying to mess anything up, she protested. I just wanted to see him, to talk. You had 3 years to talk, Michael pointed out. You didn't want to then. Why now? Because I didn't know. She burst out, louder than intended. Several people turned to look. She lowered her voice. I didn't know he'd become this. I didn't know he'd be successful and confident and with someone else, I thought. You thought he'd still be waiting for you, Michael finished. You thought you could keep him as a backup option while you looked for someone better. But there is no one better than Jimmy, and Clara figured that out a lot faster than you did. His words stung because they were true. Janet had always seen me as less than, as the safe fallback option if her pursuit of wealth and status didn't work out. Now that I'd achieved both, she wanted back in, not because she loved me, but because she couldn't stand losing. It's too late, Michael said, not unkindly. Even if he wasn't with Clara, even if he wasn't getting married, it would be too late. You can't treat someone the way you treated him and expect them to wait forever. Janet watched across the bar as Clara said something that made me laugh, really laugh, my whole face lighting up. Then I pulled her close and kissed her, right there in front of everyone, with a confidence and openness I'd never had with Janet. Because I'd never been ashamed of Clara. I'd never hidden her or treated her like a secret. She was mine, and I was proud of that fact. Janet left the party shortly after, tears streaming down her face as she sat in her car. She'd lost me, truly and completely. But worse than that, she was realizing she might never find what I'd found with Clara. Because what we had wasn't about money or status or surface-level attraction. It was about genuine connection, mutual respect, real love. Things Janet had spent her whole life dismissing as less important than material success. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother asking if she'd heard that the Norton boy was getting married next week, saying what a lovely couple Jimmy and his fiancée made, suggesting Janet should send a gift. Janet stared at the message, then did something she hadn't done in years. She opened her old messages with me, scrolled back through 3 years of silence to our last conversation. Her final message read, "It's better this way. You'll thank me someday." She'd been so sure, so confident that leaving me was the right choice. Now, sitting alone in her car outside a bar where I was celebrating with friends and the woman I loved, Janet realized she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. And there was absolutely nothing she could do to fix it. The week before my wedding, I was swamped with final preparations. Clara had taken charge of most details, insisting I focus on work since we had a major client presentation right before the ceremony. She was thoughtful like that, always considering my stress levels, always trying to make my life easier. We decided on a small ceremony, just close friends and family, at a beautiful venue outside the city. Nothing extravagant, but meaningful and personal. Everything felt perfect, like my life was finally falling into place after years of struggle. Then Janet showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed to say someone was there to see me, wouldn't give a name, said it was personal. When Janet walked through my office door, I felt a jolt of shock followed immediately by irritation. "How did you get in here?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. "I told them I was an old friend with an emergency," she said, closing the door behind her. She looked different than she had at the party. Less polished, more vulnerable. Her hair was pulled back simply, minimal makeup, dressed in jeans and a sweater rather than designer clothes. It was a calculated move, I realized. She was trying to remind me of simpler times, of the girl I'd fallen for before I understood what she really was. "What do you want, Janet?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "To talk," she said softly. "Please, Jimmy. Just give me 10 minutes. I glanced at my watch. I had a meeting in 20 minutes, and Clara was supposed to call during my lunch break. "You have 5. I said coldly. She flinched at my tone but pressed forward. "I made a mistake," she said, the words tumbling out quickly. 3 years ago, when I left you, I made a terrible mistake. I was young and stupid and I didn't understand what I had. And now you do?" I asked skeptically. "Now I do," she confirmed, taking a step closer. "I've spent 3 years dating men who looked perfect on paper, and none of them were half the person you are. None of them cared about me the way you did. None of them made me feel the way you made me feel. And how did I make you feel?" I asked, my voice hard. "Safe," she whispered. "Loved. Like I mattered more than anything else in the world." I laughed, a bitter sound. "That's interesting. Because while I was making you feel that way, you were making me feel worthless. Like I was never good enough, like I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you threw my way." "I know," she said, and tears started forming in her eyes. Real tears, not manipulative ones. I know I treated you terribly. I took you for granted. I was so focused on finding someone wealthy that I didn't see the value in someone genuine. So now that I'm wealthy too, suddenly I have value. I asked pointedly. She shook her head quickly. It's not about the money. Isn't it? I challenged. 3 years ago, you told me I could never give you the life you wanted. Now, I can, and suddenly you're here. Seems pretty clearly about the money to me. It's not, she insisted. If it was just about money, I could date plenty of rich men. I have been dating rich men. But none of them are you, Jimmy. None of them have your heart, your kindness, your integrity. Had. I corrected. I had those things for you. Past tense. I spent years giving you everything I had, and you treated it like garbage. You really think I'm stupid enough to do that again? I'm not asking you to, she said desperately. I'm just asking for a chance. One chance to show you I've changed, that I understand now what really matters. You're asking for a chance? I repeated incredulously. Janet, I'm getting married in 6 days. To someone who actually loves me, who's never made me feel less than, who chose me when I had nothing to prove. What exactly do you think is going to happen here? Don't marry her. Janet blurted out, and the room fell silent. I stared at her, genuinely shocked by her audacity. Excuse me. Don't marry her. She repeated, moving closer until she was right in front of my desk. You don't love her, not really. You're marrying her to prove something, to show me and everyone else that you've moved on. But we both know what we had was real. What we had was toxic, I said firmly. You used me for 2 years, kept me as your secret, your backup plan while you dated other men. Then you threw me away the second someone shinier came along. That's not love, Janet. That's cruelty. I was wrong, she said, tears streaming freely now. I was so wrong about everything. But people make mistakes, Jimmy. People grow and change. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. Neither am I said coldly. The person I was 3 years ago would probably be touched by this speech. He'd probably consider giving you another chance because he was desperate and pathetic and thought you were the best he could do. But I'm not him anymore. I know you're not, she said. You're successful and confident and everything I always knew you could be. But that doesn't change the connection we had, the history between us. The history of you treating me like dirt, I asked. That's what you want to build on? She was close enough now that I could smell her perfume, the same scent she used to wear when she'd come to my apartment late at night. It was another calculated move, trying to trigger memories and old feelings. It didn't work. All I felt was anger. We were good together, sometimes, she said softly. Remember those mornings when I'd stay for breakfast? The way we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing? The way you'd look at me like I was the only person in the world? I remember feeling those things, I said. I don't remember you reciprocating them. But I did, she insisted. I just didn't know how to show it. I was scared of how much I felt for you, scared of what choosing you would mean for my future. So I pushed you away and convinced myself it was for the best. But it wasn't, Jimmy. Losing you was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Before I could respond, before I could tell her to leave, she moved around my desk and grabbed my hand. Please, she whispered, looking up at me with those green eyes that had once had the power to make me forget my own name. Please don't throw away what we could have because you're angry about the past. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve another chance. But I'm begging you anyway. Call off the wedding. Give us a real chance, a fair chance without all the secrecy and shame. Let me prove I can love you the way you always deserved. For a moment, I just looked at her. Part of me, the part that had loved her for so many years, wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that she'd genuinely changed, that we could start over and build something real. But then I thought about Clara. Clara who'd never played games with my heart, who'd been honest and direct from day one, who loved me not despite my flaws but including them. Clara who made me laugh every day, who supported my dreams, who made me want to be better not because I wasn't good enough, but because she made me want to give her the best version of myself. And I thought about the night Janet had left me, the casual cruelty of, you could never give me the life I want, the way she'd walked out without looking back, the years of pain and self-doubt that had followed. No, I said simply, pulling my hand away. Janet looked like I'd slapped her. What? No, I repeated. I'm not calling off my wedding. I'm not giving you another chance. I'm not interested in rebuilding something that was broken from the start. But I love you, she said desperately. I love you, Jimmy. I know I never said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you. You don't love me, I said wearily. You love the idea of me now that I'm successful. You love winning, having what someone else has. But you don't actually love me, because you never bothered to know me well enough to love. That's not true, she protested. Then tell me, I challenged. Tell me something real about me. Not surface stuff, not things everyone knows. Tell me what my actual dreams are, what keeps me up at night, what I'm most afraid of. She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. You can't, I said. Because in all the time we spent together, you never asked. You never cared about who I actually was, only what I could do for you. Clara can answer those questions. Clara knows me, really knows me, because she cared enough to ask and listen. I can learn, Janet said. Give me time. I'll learn everything about you. I don't want to teach you, I said. I don't want to be with someone I have to convince to see my value. I want to be with someone who sees it naturally, automatically. Without effort. Someone like Clara. She's not better than me, Janet said, and there was a flash of the old arrogance. She's not prettier, not more sophisticated, not from a better family. You're right, I agreed. She's not better than you in those superficial ways you care about. But she's better than you in every way that matters. She's kinder, more genuine, more emotionally available. She makes me happy without making me feel like I have to earn it. Janet was fully crying now, mascara running despite the minimal makeup. Please, Jimmy. Please don't do this. I can't lose you. You lost me 3 years ago. I said gently but firmly. You just didn't notice because you didn't care. Now you only care because I'm not available anymore, and that's not enough to build a relationship on. So that's it? She asked. You're just going to marry her and forget everything we had. What we had wasn't worth remembering, I said honestly. It was painful and one-sided and damaging. Meeting Clara helped me understand what a real relationship looks like, and I'm never going back to anything less than that. You're making a mistake, Janet said, anger creeping into her voice now. She'll never understand you like I do. She'll never be able to give you what I can. She already gives me more than you ever did, I said. Peace, respect, genuine love. Things you wouldn't recognize if they hit you in the face. Janet stared at me for a long moment, seeming to realize that nothing she said would change my mind. Fine, she said coldly, wiping her tears and straightening her spine. Marry your boring little artist. Settle for someone safe and simple, but don't come crying to me when you realize what you gave up. I won't, I assured her. Because I know exactly what I gave up. A relationship that made me miserable, with someone who saw me as less than. Best decision I ever made. She turned toward the door, then stopped. I meant it, you know. I do love you. Maybe you do. I conceded. In your own broken way. But it's not the kind of love I want or need. And it's about 3 years too late. She left without another word, and I sat back down at my desk, feeling emotionally drained but certain. My phone buzzed with a text from Clara. A silly selfie of her covered in paint with the caption, "Art emergency. Might need a real shower before I can be seen in public at our wedding." I smiled. Texted back. "You're beautiful covered in paint," and felt my heart settle. Janet had been my past, a painful necessary chapter that taught me what I didn't want. Clara was my future, and I'd never been more certain of anything in my life. The wedding day arrived clear and bright, one of those perfect spring days that felt like a gift from the universe. I stood at the altar in a suit that actually fit properly, custom-tailored rather than borrowed or bought on sale, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. Michael stood beside me as best man, and he leaned over to whisper, "You look terrified." "Good terrified or bad terrified?" I asked. "Good terrified," he confirmed. "The kind that means you know you're about to start something important." The music started, and Clara appeared at the end of the aisle. She looked breathtaking in a simple white dress, carrying wildflowers instead of an expensive bouquet, smiling so widely I could see it from across the room. As she walked toward me, I felt every doubt, every fear, every lingering shadow from my past with Janet dissolve completely. This was right. This was real. This was everything I'd never known I deserved. When she reached me, she whispered, "You look handsome," and I whispered back, "You look like home." The ceremony was short and sweet, focused on vows we'd written ourselves. Clara promised to support my dreams, challenge me to grow, and love me through every season of life. I promised to cherish her creativity, respect her independence, and never take for granted the gift of being chosen by her. When the officiant said I could kiss my bride, I did, pouring every ounce of gratitude and love I felt into that moment. Our guests cheered. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely at peace. The reception was small and intimate, held in a garden venue with string lights and comfortable seating. No fancy ice sculptures or elaborate decorations, just good food, better company, and an atmosphere of genuine celebration. I was talking with Clara's parents when Michael pulled me aside. "Don't look now, but you have an uninvited guest," he said quietly. I followed his gaze to the entrance, where Janet stood awkwardly, clearly not knowing whether to come in or leave. She was dressed elegantly but not flashily, and she looked genuinely miserable. "How did she even know where this was?" I asked. "Small town, everyone talks," Michael said. "Your parents probably mentioned it to hers. Do you want me to ask her to leave?" I looked at Clara, who was laughing with her college friends, completely unaware of the drama at the entrance. She looked so happy, so radiant, exactly how a bride should look on her wedding day. "No," I said. "I'll handle it." I walked over to Janet, who straightened when she saw me approaching. "I know I shouldn't be here," she said immediately. "I just needed to see it with my own eyes." "See what?" I asked. "That it's real," she said quietly. "That you actually went through with it. That you're actually happy without me." "I am," I said simply. "Happier than I've ever been." She looked past me at Clara, at the celebration, at everything she'd convinced herself didn't matter. "She's lucky," Janet said finally. "To have someone who looks at her the way you used to look at me." "Used to," I emphasized. Past tense. "And honestly, Janet, she's not the lucky one. I am. Because she chose me when I was nobody special, just a guy starting out with more ambition than capital. She didn't wait until I proved myself. She saw my potential before I had anything to show for it, like I could have." Janet said softly. "If I'd been smarter, if you'd been different," I corrected, "and you weren't. You are who you are, and that's fine. You'll find someone whose values match yours, someone who cares about the same things you do. But that someone isn't me." Janet nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes again. "I really did love you, Jimmy. Maybe not well. Maybe not in a way you could feel. But in the only way I knew how. I believe you," I said, and I meant it. But love that makes someone feel worthless isn't really love at all. It's just need dressed up in prettier words. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For not seeing what I had, for treating you like you didn't matter. For wasting the years you gave me." "I'm not," I said honestly. "Because those painful years taught me what to look for in a partner, what I deserved, what real love should feel like. If you hadn't broken my heart, I might never have been ready to appreciate Clara when she came along. So in a weird way, thank you." Janet wiped her eyes carefully, trying not to smudge her makeup. "I should go." "Yeah, you should," I agreed gently. "But Janet, I hope you find happiness. Real happiness, not just the appearance of it. You deserve that much, even if we were never right for each other." She gave me a sad smile. "You're a better person than I ever gave you credit for." "I'm just a person who finally learned his worth," I said. "Maybe you should try learning yours too. And I don't mean your worth based on who you're dating, or how expensive your lifestyle is. Your actual worth, as a human being. You might be surprised what you find." She nodded, took one last look at the celebration happening behind me, and turned to leave. I watched her walk away, feeling nothing but relief and closure. When I turned back to the party, Clara was watching me with a concerned expression. "Everything okay?" she asked when I reached her. "Everything's perfect," I assured her, pulling her close. "Just saying goodbye to the past." "Anyone I should know about?" she asked curiously. "Someone I used to know," I said honestly. "Someone who taught me a lot about what I don't want in a relationship, which helped me recognize what I do want when I found you." She studied my face for a moment, then smiled. "Well, I hope you thank them, because I'm very grateful you were available when we met." "Already did," I said, kissing her forehead. "Now can we please focus on the fact that I just married the most incredible woman I've ever met?" She laughed, pulling me toward the dance floor. "I suppose we should dance, since that's traditional." "I should warn you, I'm a terrible dancer," I said. "I know," she replied. "I've seen you dance. I'm marrying you anyway. That's how much I love you." As we swayed together, me stepping on her feet occasionally, both of us laughing, I caught a glimpse of my parents watching us with proud smiles. My mother was crying happy tears, and my father had his arm around her shoulders. They'd watched me struggle through my heartbreak over Janet, had worried I'd never recover, and now they were seeing me truly happy. Michael appeared with champagne glasses for everyone, and we gathered for toasts. He went first, telling embarrassing stories from college that made everyone laugh, then turned serious. "Jimmy's one of the best people I know," he said, looking right at me. "Not because he's successful, though he is. Not because he's smart, though he is that too. But because he has this incredible capacity to keep believing in goodness even after being hurt. He could have become bitter and closed off, but instead, he stayed open long enough to find someone who deserves that openness. Clara, you're getting an incredible man. And Jimmy, you're finally getting what you always deserved. We drank to that, and then Clara's father stood. I'm not a man of many words, he said, but I know quality when I see it. Jimmy treats my daughter like she's precious, like she matters, like her happiness is his priority, and he does it naturally, without having to think about it. That's rare. That's real. That's the kind of man you want your daughter to marry. More toasts followed, from friends and family. Each one emphasizing different aspects of our relationship but all circling back to the same theme. We were right together. We balanced each other. We brought out the best in each other. As the evening wore on and the celebration continued, I found a quiet moment to step outside and look at the stars. Clara found me there a few minutes later, sliding her hand into mine. What are you thinking about? She asked. About how different my life is from what I thought it would be, I said. 3 years ago, I thought the best I could hope for was someone who'd eventually learn to appreciate me. I never imagined I'd find someone who appreciated me from day one. Well, I'm very smart, she said playfully. I recognize quality when I see it. You know what's funny? I said. Janet showed up tonight. She wasn't invited, but she came anyway. Clara tensed slightly. Should I be worried? Not even a little bit, I assured her. She wanted to see if I was really happy. I told her I was happier than I'd ever been, and I meant it. Then she left, and I came back to you, where I belong. Janet, Clara repeated thoughtfully. The girl from your hometown? The one Michael said, put you through hell. That's the one, I confirmed. But she's irrelevant now. She's just someone I used to know, someone who helped shape who I became, but has no place in who I'm becoming. Clara squeezed my hand. You know what I love about you, Jimmy? You don't hold on to bitterness. You learn from pain and then let it go. That's rare. I learned it from you, I said. Watching how you handle setbacks, how you don't let failures define you. You taught me that the past is just information, not a prison. Look at us, she laughed, getting all philosophical on our wedding night. It's the champagne, I joked. Makes me deep. You're always deep, she countered. It's one of your more attractive qualities. We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the music and laughter from inside. Ready to go back? She asked eventually. Ready to start the rest of our lives? I asked in return. More than ready, she said firmly. We walked back inside together, hand in hand, and rejoined our celebration. I danced with my mother, who cried again and told me how proud she was. I hugged my father, who gruffly said, "You did good, son," which was about as emotional as he got. I laughed with Michael, who promised to be the world's best uncle to our future children. And mostly, I stayed close to Clara, my wife, my partner, my choice, and my future. As the night wound down and guests started leaving, Clara and I stood at the entrance thanking everyone for coming. Her aunt pulled me aside and whispered, "You know, I tried to set my niece up with someone once. A nice young man from a good family. She turned him down flat, said she wasn't interested in setups. Then she met you and changed her tune completely." I'd say that's pretty telling. I'd say I'm very lucky, I replied. No, her aunt corrected. You're both lucky. That's how it should be. Finally, it was just the two of us, standing in the empty venue with discarded flower petals and half-empty glasses, the only evidence of the celebration. So, Clara said, "We're married now." "We are," I confirmed. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like everything before this was just preparation," I said honestly. "Like my real life is finally starting." "Good answer," she approved. "Very romantic." "I have my moments," I said. "Now, I believe there's a tradition about carrying you over a threshold." "Our threshold is a hotel room tonight," she pointed out. "We don't actually move into our house until next week." "Hotel threshold counts," I insisted, sweeping her up into my arms. She laughed, looping her arms around my neck. "My hero. Always," I promised. And as I carried my wife toward our future, leaving behind the ghosts of my past, I finally understood what happiness really meant. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong or becoming someone impressive or checking boxes on society's list of achievements. It was about finding someone who saw you clearly, flaws and all, and chose you anyway. It was about building something real with someone genuine. It was about letting go of what hurt you and embracing what heals you. Janet had taught me what I didn't want. Clara taught me what I did. And in the end, that painful journey from one to the other had been absolutely worth it. Because now I was here, married to a woman who loved me not for what I could provide or how I made her look, but for who I actually was. And that, I finally understood, Was what I'd been searching for all along.